Joined alongside the co-founder of Crimson Cast and editor-in-chief of IU Sportcom, Dr. Galen Clavio, here to talk some IU football. Finally happy to have you on the show. We're talking about, student media convergence all the time. Finally happy to have you here.
It's great to be here, Courtney. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Let's get right into it, though. I was down in North Texas for the UNT game, and it was just a complete disaster. Honestly, quite possibly, we'll get into this later, but might have been one of the worst losses in IU football history.
Certainly wasn't something we hoped would happen. It was a very difficult game on a lot of counts. But, it's one of those games that you would hope by this point we would not have, but we're obviously not at the point where we can avoid them.
Yeah, and if you were one of those people who didn't have ESPN3 streaming on from your computer to your television to whatever, if you were at a bar, and you look at the stat sheet, it doesn't seem like IU was too far off from North Texas, but that's probably that you didn't know that IU had a big comeback in the second half that really led to nothing. Indiana finishing with 404 yards of total offense, and North Texas finishing with 427. Let's go to the first half, though. North Texas absolutely crushed Indiana on the run game, on the pass game, basically all in part to Lance Dunbar. This team had absolutely no way to wrap their defense around that run game specifically.
It's amazing to me how many struggles we're having with the defense, with the offensive line. This is a team, frankly, that you would think has at least enough talent to compete against Sun Belt competition. We talk a lot about the differences in talent levels between, say, a lower-tier Big Ten team like Indiana and an upper-tier team like Penn State or Michigan. But to have this many problems on the road just with pure physicality is really difficult to comprehend. It really makes you wonder what is in the till as far as talent's concerned. Did we have that bare of a cupboard under Bill Lynch?
Exactly, and I know that when you take a look at this first half of this game, as we were talking about, there was, Coach Wilson always talks about the energy, the momentum. They looked flat coming right out from the beginning. I know that it brings a question, though, why was there no run game used in that first quarter alone when Indiana only had 45 rushing yards? And I know that North Texas beat them by about, 100 more than that.
Well, I just think the offense in general was having a real hard time getting itself going. And whatever the reason for that was, it's hard to say. We've heard about, a lack of concentration or a lack of taking North Texas seriously, perhaps. Any one of those is a potential explanation. But, we also have to remember that Kevin Wilson is in his first head coaching job, and he's probably making some mistakes in terms of play calling. We saw that in the Ball State game, where they probably ran the ball too much in the third quarter, and that may have ended up costing them that game. So, a lot of things that this team has to work out in terms of talent, a lot of things they have to work out in terms of scheme.
And you talk about talent right there. We didn't see some of the the normal personnel that we usually see. DeMarlo Belcher left at home for what was a minor injury, which kind of makes you wonder if that really was an injury that would impede him from going on the trip at all. Darius Wills was not there. We'll get into that. But going back to the Belcher, he was left off the depth chart early in the week. But guys usually travel if they've got minor injuries. Leon Beckham, who's not practicing with the team right now, won't be ready for 2 to 4 more weeks. He went on the trip. Does that kind of say something maybe that this is a guy who's not buying into Wilson's scheme?
It's possible. I don't know that we know that for a fact at this point. And I guess, part of the issue that we have with this team right now is there's still a big weeding out process going on between the Lynch era and the Wilson era. And I think we've seen, quite a bit that Lynch's players aren't really fitting into what Wilson wants to do.
Absolutely. I know that, let's talk about the Darius Willis situation. It was reported by the IDS that he was at a pro wrestling event on Saturday night, the exact same time the game started. Today, during media availability, it was basically ruled out that, while the medical hardship red shirt would be, it would be given, it would be available. If the NCAA accepts that, his career essentially with Indiana is over. And it wasn't like he was some guy that was missed on that team, but just the disrespect to his teammates, the fact that he wasn't even watching the game. He basically alienated himself from the beginning of the season.
Yeah, people make decisions, and a lot of it goes back to this notion of what are we trying to do, within the confines of a team dynamic. And, for Willis, it's obviously been a long off season. It's been a long start to the season, and, guys make decisions. And I think we have to understand, even though we think about college football as being like professional football, guys make personal decisions all the time, and sometimes that involves not being involved with the team anymore. And I'm not privy to the information with Willis. I don't know exactly what happened with the situation, but from the reports that I've heard and from what you've said, it does seem like, this may be a situation where he's, simply decided he's done with IU football.
And it sounds like that's about right. There are a lot of guys, though, that have apparently gone to Kevin Wilson within the last week. Kevin Bush, the guy who played on special teams, who was served in Iraq as well, he also said that he will not be returning due to family issues, and the fact that he's a 26-year-old guy now and a redshirt junior, not too much playing time. I'm not surprised that something like that happens. I wouldn't be shocked, though, by the end of this year, though, if a lot of guys are starting to fall off the bandwagon because, yes, it is a transition year, but you're not seeing a lot of, the progress that you wanted to see.
And that ends up being a situation a lot of times with college football where you have to buy into the system. We see it in pro football all the time, where a new coaching scheme comes in and they have their own ideas on how to do things, and there's a lot of guys from the previous regime that simply don't fit in for whatever reason. And there's always a weeding out process. It sometimes takes 2 or 3 years. Look at Texas A&M under Mike Sherman. I mean, that was a team that had a lot of defections, a lot of problems on the roster. Now they're in the top 10 and vying for a Big 12 title this year. So this is just the natural part of the process. I know it seems shocking because it's all happening at once, but it's something I think we should have expected and probably will have to expect more of as the season goes on.
And as the season continues on this weekend, the Big Ten opener for Indiana facing Penn State, 12 noon on Saturday. Penn State's got issues of their own right now. I mean, Rob Bolden is, a mediocre quarterback at best, I think, controlling that team. But Silas Redd really controlling this run game. Where is that defense going to kind of fit in?
Oh, it's really hard to say at this point. I have no clue what to expect in this game. I mean, everybody thought after the Ball State game we were going to come into that contest and just get slaughtered by Virginia. We end up playing them very close. We come back in the second half, we take a lead. Penn State's offense has been very nondescript so far this season. They don't really have a quarterback, as you said. They've obviously got a talent advantage over IU, and that's where the real concern comes in. But I don't think that it's necessarily a lost cause. I'd be shocked if we won, but I'd also be shocked if we got blown out by a huge margin because I think that as weeks go by, Wilson's message starts to sink in with these guys a little bit more every week, and we start to learn more things about individual players.
The win today mentality, not necessarily sinking in quite yet, as you said. Maybe as weeks go on and the Big Ten season settles in, they can actually vouch themselves as, this perennial Big Ten powerhouse, as said by ESPN heading into the game against North Texas.
That was Drew Henson, though. We can't take that too seriously.
Can't take too many things seriously from a guy, switching around from baseball to football
right.
and being essentially screwed over by Tom Brady, but not too big of a deal there. Dr. Clavio, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Let's send it back to the anchor desk with Lucas and AJ.